What's up, my comic comrades? It's Revenge of the Fifth, so today we're embracing the dark side with a look back at some of the original and most powerful dark side force wielders during the Old Republic. The Old Republic is easily one of the most fan-loved periods in Star Wars mythology, and if we're being honest, I'm sure many of us wish Lucasfilm would have centered a show around that era instead of the High Republic era series we're getting with the Acolyte. But that's the direction they went, so while we wait, we're just going to dive in ourselves and talk about the most powerful Sith of the Old Republic era. First up, we're going to start with a no-dust Sith Lord from the Old Republic, and that is Darth Bane. Darth Bane is probably the most legendary of the Sith Lords, and I'm not just talking about the Old Republic. I'm talking in general, as he is the one who created the Rule of Two, which states a master and an apprentice, no more, no less. Hence there only being two Sith at a time. As far as the Skywalker saga goes, we have Darth Maul Insidious, Darth Tyrannus Insidious, before we ultimately got Darth Vader Insidious. Now, as far as powers go for Bane, he was the sole survivor of a 1,000-year war between the Sith and the Jedi, simply called the Jedi-Sith War. This took place an entire millennium before the Clone Wars. Just think about what that says about him. He's the sole survivor of a 1,000-year war between the Jedi and Sith. That is crazy. This single-handedly makes Bane one of the most important Sith to ever exist, because without him, the Sith may have never come into power again, as he was the sole remaining agent. They would have likely gone extinct and only be a thing of stories. But Bane was very intelligent, so as the sole surviving member of the Sith, he realized that fighting amongst the Sith had made them weak. So weak, the Jedi were able to take all of them out except him. So he decided to develop a new approach for the Sith, creating and implementing the Rule of Two while simultaneously taking a new approach to defeat the Jedi. He and his apprentice would secretly plot to conquer and control the galaxy by first systematically and secretly taking out the Jedi Order, something that Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious, would continue and ultimately succeed in, but his victory was short-lived once Anakin Skywalker, former Jedi and Chosen One turned Sith, was redeemed and brought back to the light with the help of his son Luke. The point is, without Darth Bane's evil stealthy genius implementing the Rule of Two to secretly take out the Jedi Order from the shadows, the Sith would have never been able to rule the galaxy like the Empire did under the command of Emperor Palpatine. Because of his intelligence alone and exceptional military tactical leadership skills, he is one of the most important and powerful Sith Lords to ever be. He would be on the Mount Rushmore of Sith Lords. That's how important and powerful he is. But let's not get it twisted, he is also extremely intimidating and lethal physically, being an exceptional lightsaber duelist, extremely agile, strong, and incredibly powerful in the Force. Point is, he's got it all. Next up, we have Darth Nihilus, who is easily one of the coolest of all the Sith Lords because of how different he is, but also, he's one of the most powerful. You see, Nihilus in simple terms is basically the Force Wraith like the Ring Wraith from Lord of the Rings. He is known as the Dark Lord of Hunger. He was extremely powerful in the Force. So much so, he was addicted to it, constantly hungering for it. After the final battle of the Mandalorian Wars, he became what's called a wound in the Force. This is basically a weakness in the fabric of time that's caused by a traumatic event. The traumatic event for Nihilus would be the super weapon known as the Mass Shadow, a weapon that almost destroyed him. Like so many villains, he would be fueled by revenge. Anyway, what would make Nihilus such a powerful Sith is the fact that he was constantly absorbing and feeding off of people's life energy. He's basically like a force parasite, sucking the life force out of everyone, even entire planets, because of his addiction and hunger for more power. But over time, after consuming entire planets worth of life energy, he became so consumed by the dark side of the Force and his hunger that his physical body literally started to erode. He needed to act quickly before his body was completely devoured, so he used his power to transfer his consciousness into his mask and cloak while his physical body was disintegrated, as he became living primitive intention. So Nihilus is literally a dark-side spirit, just a floating mask and armor wrapped in a robe that he keeps together to give him the shape of a human form so he could still use his powers and lightsaber. At this point, he had become essentially living hunger, binging on the Force, and he nearly completely got rid of the Jedi when he destroyed the planet Qatar by consuming it all Galactus style. What I'm saying is, one of the reasons he is so powerful is because of his incredibly powerful Force strain ability. He's a living hunger that feeds on life force to become stronger in the dark side. He uses this Force strain to withdraw the life force from entire planets just to satisfy his hunger and become more powerful. And on top of all that, Nihilus was one of the main people responsible for the Jedi Purge. All in all, as I mentioned, Nihilus is basically like a Ring Wraith or Galactus. He consumes life force to survive and become more powerful. He's extremely threatening and also one of the most important Sith to have ever lived. Speaking of crazy saber-wielding Sith, let me introduce you to today's sponsor, LegionSabers.com. Their motto is, if your lightsaber is a toy, it is time to upgrade. And they're not playing. They sent over their Obi-Wan saber, Darth Maul saber staff, and one of our personal favorites, the Dark Saber. And each of them are insanely awesome. I'm telling you, if you're looking for incredible saber designs, you gotta check out LegionSabers.com. LegionSabers.com sells battle-ready lightsabers that bring a galaxy far, far away right into your hands. These sabers are NeoPixel, which means they have LEDs inside the blade from top to bottom that light up your saber, with features like Fire Blade, Rainbow Mode, and Flash on Clash. Legion Sabers feels like the real thing. They even have gesture control so you can turn your saber on just by twisting your hand. To top it off, they also have more than 70 replicas and original designs to choose from at all price points. So forget about that toy you got and upgrade your saber to experience the lightsaber battles your inner Star Wars fan deserves. Their sabers are backed by a full-year warranty, and if you go to LegionSabers.com/variant and use code VARIANT, you'll get up to 30% off your order. But wait, there's more. For a limited time, when you buy any saber, you'll also get a second mystery saber totally free. So up to 30% off plus a free second saber. You can't pass that up. The best deals of the year are happening right now, so don't wait. Just click our link in the description below. Alright, as mentioned, the next Old Republic era Sith we have is Darth Plagueis. He was the master of Darth Sidious, from whom Sidious learned everything. And we all know how powerful the Sith Emperor became. Plagueis was an all-around powerful Sith Lord, but his true power and claim to fame came from his ability to use the Force along with science to influence midichlorians to create life or make someone immortal. In layman's terms, he was able to use his power in the Force to figure out how to create life and become immortal. This was an ability that was extremely rare for Force users. However, one day his apprentice, Sidious, would murder him in his sleep. Palpatine would tell Anakin in Revenge of the Sith the story of his former master, whom he referred to as Plagueis the Wise, and how he learned immortality or to keep people from death. This would ultimately be enough to lure Anakin to the dark side, where he would become Darth Vader. So the fact that Plagueis was able to create life and unlock immortality easily makes him one of the most powerful Sith of the Old Republic. Not to mention, it's because of this ability he unlocked, Sidious was able to lure the Chosen One, Anakin Skywalker, to the dark side, taking out the Republic and ruling the galaxy with the Empire. Next, we have Darth Vitiate. He was the Sith Emperor during the Old Republic era and ruled the Sith Empire for 1,500 years, meaning he was the top dog. And the reason he was the Sith Emperor is because he was known as the deadliest Sith Lord to ever exist. He could take out thousands of people, I mean completely massacre them, even Force users, by simply draining them of their power. Put it this way, he once gathered all of the remaining Sith Lords that were left in the galaxy, then proceeded to feed on their power as well as the life of a whole dang planet, at which point he became one of the strongest living beings to ever take a breath in the galaxy of Star Wars. Now I know what some of you may be thinking, but couldn't Darth Nihilus also consume the energy and life force from an entire planet? Yes, he could, but Vitiate took it to a whole other level. You see, Nihilus did indeed feed off the Force, even consumed entire planets, and the life force made him incredibly powerful, but beyond that, he wouldn't do much with it. However, Vitiate was able to do a lot more with Force Drain and his abilities. Dude could straight up control multiple Force-sensitive proxies all at the same time who were on the opposite side of the galaxy. Also, with a single thought, he could dominate someone's mind and turn them to the dark side. And on top of that, he was extremely skilled in the art of Sith alchemy and sorcery. What I'm saying is, Vitiate would simply just take over Nihilus or anyone else's mind who was coming for him. He was a damn force to be reckoned with, and he was extremely powerful in the Force since he was a child. So much so, by the time he reached 13, Marka Ragnos, a Dark Lord of the Sith, saw the potential in him and brought him to the dark side, giving him the title of Lord Vitiate. He would soon become a scholar and spent a century studying secrets of Sith sorcery and the dark side, eventually becoming the most powerful user of both Sith alchemy and magic throughout history. Dude even came up with rituals to warp reality and life itself. This guy was a real problem. It's easy to see how he's one of the most powerful Sith to have ever lived, certainly top 3. But moving on, we have Darth Revan. Revan is probably my favorite Sith from the Old Republic, even though homeboy liked to jump back and forth between Sith and Jedi, but nonetheless, he was one hell of a powerful Sith. Now I can go on and on ranting about how powerful Darth Revan is, but we actually posted an entire episode on how powerful he was yesterday, so check that out right here. Obviously, he has insane Force abilities like telekinesis, healing, Force Drain, teleportation, absorption, and the list goes on. But what truly sets Revan apart, what makes him so powerful, powerful is the same thing I said in the How Powerful is Revan episode, is his ability to both resist and embrace the dark side of the Force. He started off as a Jedi, then eventually got lured to the dark side, becoming an incredibly powerful Sith Lord, only to be redeemed by going back to the light side of the Force. From this position, he has a very unique and rare understanding of both the light and dark sides of the Force. Yes, there's been tons of Jedi turned Sith, so those former Jedi do understand the light side as well, but they have not jumped back and forth like a ping pong ball like Revan has to be able to control and resist the dark side multiple times. That is an insanely unique power and ability distinct to Revan. In a lot of ways, this makes him one of the most well-rounded Force users to ever exist. He's all around awesome, and the fact that he has complete mastery of both sides and is not tied down to either of them is just really cool and not something we see much. Not to mention, every time he would jump back and forth from the light to the dark side, he became stronger. Next, we have Darth Malak. Malak, much like Revan, used to be a Jedi, and the two were actually very good friends. Both of them would eventually fall to the dark side, with Revan becoming the Sith Lord Master of Malak. Now, because Revan was extremely powerful, obviously so was his apprentice Malak. However, the reason for Malak's metal jaw is because Revan took his jaw off with a lightsaber strike. But let's hone in on Malak's power, as that's what we're talking about today. As a Jedi, he was trained as a Jedi Guardian, meaning he heavily focused on lightsaber combat. So he's a very proficient lightsaber duelist. He was actually recognized as one of the best swordsmen of his time. He was so skilled in saber combat, he often fought in a one-handed aggressive style. Malak was also able to use Force Choke on multiple people at the same time. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, but speaking of crazy, he was able to use the Force to give himself greater speed and reflexes, essentially augmenting his abilities to a great degree with the Force. He was so proficient in manipulating the Force, he was able to use it to make himself invulnerable to other Force users or Force-based powers for a short amount of time. That ability is pretty dang crazy. He couldn't do it for a long period of time, but nonetheless, that can come in handy. Malak was even able to amplify his screams like he's a Banshee or Black Bolt. His scream was able to trigger massive shockwaves that would ripple straight through the Force. I bet that's a power not many of you knew he had. Another one of my favorite abilities of his is being able to use the Force to see someone's biggest fears and pain, as well as any hate they may carry. He could then convert those fears, pain, and hate into immense anger, which he could use to increase his abilities like strength, ferocity, and so on. And of course, he is able to use Force lightning, dark healing, and more. But now it's time to move on to Darth Malgus. Malgus basically is the Old Republic version of Darth Vader. I remember even thinking this to myself when I was younger and the Old Republic game came out. I was like, is this just Vader in a different costume? But besides a somewhat similar look, he is a Sith Lord of pure rage like Darth Vader. Malgus is also massive like Vader. In fact, Malgus is one of the largest Sith of all time. Dude was physically imposing like Braun Strowman, being able to overpower all of his opponents just with his raw strength. Now, a Sith Lord of his stature and strength is already extremely intimidating and scary, but it doesn't stop there. Malgus was described by a Jedi Grand Master as having the perfect saber technique. Not only is he just a slab of meat, being able to throw anyone around, but he was also an incredible swordsman and sabersman. But on top of all of his physical abilities and skill, he was also immensely powerful with the Force, being able to release Force lightning that was able to take out multiple opponents at the same time. Put it this way, he was so powerful, he thought himself better than both the Sith Empire and the Jedi Order and wanted to create his own empire. At this point, the Jedi and Sith would come together for a common threat, defeating him. He was so powerful and such a threat, the Jedi and Sith saw him as a common enemy. That is crazy. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen those epic Darth Malgus cinematics. They're probably the best Star Wars lightsaber duels we've ever got. They're still absolutely mind-blowing. Moving on, we have Marka Ragnos. Ragnos was part of the very early days of the Sith Empire. Because of this, he was one of the early rulers of the Sith Empire. He was a ruthless Sith Lord during his reign, and because of this, he would bring the Sith into what is known as the Golden Age of the Sith, eliminating the constant bickering and fighting within them. Ragnos is the descendant of the Dark Jedi who was exiled from the Republic after the 100-year darkness. As for his power, he was considered to be one of the most powerful Force users in Jedi or Sith history. He was so powerful, he was able to keep the essence of his body alive for 5,000 years after his death, meaning he was very proficient in the use of Sith magic or sorcery. Something that's also pretty distinct to him is that he didn't always use or wield a lightsaber, the most common weapon for a Sith Lord or Jedi. Instead, he would often use a Sith sword, which is a metal-bladed sword that's enhanced by Sith sorcery and magic. It's a weapon used by early Sith who came before him. Though considered primitive as it came before the lightsaber, you're still talking about an enchanted magic sword that's enhanced with alchemy. That's pretty badass, and we need to see more of this. Ragnos hid his sword in his scepter, and like other Dark Force users mentioned on this list, he could use the dark side to make himself nearly unwoundable in battle. And lastly, we have Darth Traya. She is such a problem. She was the main antagonist for Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. She was different from many other Sith Lords as she mostly relied on raw strength and power. Although she was proficient in the Force, she didn't like to flaunt it as much. She also kind of considered herself in the gray area of the Force, but she definitely leaned more heavily to the dark side. With that said, she was a master manipulator, always scheming behind the scenes to trick people into doing her bidding. Put it this way, she's so powerful, Revan was one of her students when they were both Jedi. She's the one who helped inspire Revan to look beyond the Jedi teachings for answers to some of the Force's biggest mysteries. But Revan wasn't her only student, so was Darth Sion and Nihilus, some of the greatest Sith Lords who have ever lived, most of which we've already mentioned. If you haven't caught on, what makes Traya so powerful is her unique understanding, perspective, and use of the Force. You see, most Sith Lords just wield raw, crude power, but Traya's strength comes from her intelligence, wisdom, and insight, which makes her incredibly dangerous. But before we wrap up the episode, we do have some honorable mentions like Fedon Nod. He was a former Jedi prodigy who decided to go to the dark side, which caused a massive impact on galactic events for many centuries after his death. He was incredibly dangerous and a scholar of the Force. We also have Darth Sion, who is known as the Sith Lord of Pain. Among his many powers, he was able to use his hatred to channel the dark side and hold his broken, decayed, zombie-looking body together, making him essentially immortal. Legitimately, when he was struck down, he could just call upon his hate, anger, and pain and use the Force to make him come alive again. But there you have it, friends, some of the most powerful Sith of the Old Republic era. Let us know what your favorite is down in the comments. Other than that, remember, fear is the path to the dark side.